Hello to everyone who's joined us already. This is a parent Q&A session on how to start achieving success with the 11 Plus and entrance exams. We're going to get started bang on 7 o'clock, so we're just going to wait 2 minutes. Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started now. So, as we say, this is a session all about the 11 Plus and entrance exams. And thanks very much to everyone who's joined us. The way this session is going to run is it is a Q&A session, so we're going to have the opportunity for you guys to ask some questions, and we'll go through those as well. We're going to be presenting for about half the time, maybe 20 minutes or so. So we're going to give you some information, and then we'll go through questions at the end. So the focus of the session, it's actually built around a session that we set out in our Discover More Festival in the summer. So we first ran it then. And it's all about how to sort of understand what's involved in the 11 Plus entrance exams, and what's involved in them, and then using that information, what our kind of top tips to achieve success would be, and also obviously how we support with that. Obviously the courses that we run are kind of following what we would recommend to do to practice with those. So just to introduce myself, so my name is Lewis, really nice to meet you all. I used to work in the Rugby Explore Learning Centre, and where I grew up, there weren't any grammar schools or independent schools really. So when I grew up, when I went through school, 11 Plus wasn't really a thing for me. I never sat it when I was younger. But then I went and started working in the Rugby Centre for about 4 or 5 years, and it's really big there. It's a really big thing in kind of Birmingham, East Birmingham, Warwickshire, and Rugby. So we used to have a really big cohort every year going through. So I ended up with hundreds and hundreds of children going through and studying for the 11 Plus. My job now, so I now work for head office for the education team, and I work as a curriculum manager for the company. So I'm really closely linked to kind of all the centres all over the UK. So I work with them on their delivery of the content, including the 11 Plus, and I also work a little bit in the creation of that content as well. We've also got my colleague Laura with us today. So Laura's going to be manning the Q&A box. I'm just going to get Laura to introduce herself.
Hello everybody and welcome to our session this evening. My name is Laura and I also work at Explore Learning as a curriculum development manager. Really similar to Lewis, I grew up in an area, as you can probably tell by my accent, in the north. I grew up in an area where 11 Plus, grammar schools, independent schools weren't a big thing, so I didn't sit the 11 Plus myself, but I have managed various centres across Manchester and the north east of England, and as part of my time managing the centres, I did run lots of our 11 Plus courses with our members. In my role now as a curriculum development manager, I'm heavily involved with the creation of lots of the Year 4 and Year 5 11 Plus content, so the books that the children use as part of the course, and the practice papers that they do as part of the course as well.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Laura. So I'm just going to go over a few things just to make this session run hopefully as smoothly as possible. It's a bit of a new thing for us using the live event. Normally we use like webinar and things like that, but we found that this is the best platform to do this kind of session. So just to kind of clarify for everyone that your video and your audio isn't recording at all on these sessions. So when you're attending this session, we can't hear you, we can't see you, so you don't need to worry about anyone kind of seeing your video or anything like that. If you would like to communicate with us, then there's a Q&A function on the right hand side. So if you go to the top right hand part of the page, you'll see a speech bubble, a couple of speech bubbles with a question mark in. And if you click that, that's the Q&A function that you can use to communicate with us. Now, like I say, Laura's going to be keeping an eye on the Q&A function at all times. And when you post in there, it comes through directly to us to start with. It doesn't go into like a public vision. So you can post anything through to us that you'd like us to see, any questions that you have, and we can either then respond to that privately, or we can maybe respond to it verbally if we feel like it's something that everyone might want to know. So please just pop anything in there. Like I say, Laura will keep an eye on that throughout the session, but we will dedicate time specifically at the end of the session to go through questions and answers. So we might not be able to respond to them kind of as they come through, but we will be keeping an eye on the questions as they come through, and we'll be responding to as many as we can. So we'll try and pick out the key themes that people are asking about, and we'll respond to as many as we can. We can't guarantee that we can respond to every individual question, but we'll do our best to do that. So like I say, just before we dive into the presentation that we've got before we do the Q&A, we're going to be going through some information about the 11+, and like I say, the function of this session really is to give you the knowledge that you need to kind of understand everything that hopefully you need to know about the 11+, and therefore to be able to really tackle it successfully and to feel confident in kind of whether it's your child or a child that and helping them towards it. So I'm just going to share my PowerPoint. Just bear with me because it takes a couple of times when we're doing the live event. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see that PowerPoint now. Laura, can I just check, is that now full screen for you guys?
It absolutely is.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'll get started. Okay, everyone. So the structure of the session, we're going to introduce you guys to the 11+ and entrance exams and just go through some of the key information that it's good to know just about them. We're then going to talk about what's involved, so some of the kind of the subjects that you might see cropping up in 11+ and entrance exams. And then we're going to dive into kind of how we support and how we feel you can achieve success with the 11+ and entrance exams. Like I say, they are kind of the same thing because obviously we've designed our support around how we feel you can achieve success. But we'll go through some of the key points and top tips there. And as I say, at the end, we will have time to kind of come back to any questions that we maybe haven't been able to respond to maybe privately throughout the session as well. In terms of an introduction to the 11+, the easiest way to kind of describe what 11+ and entrance exams are is that they're used to determine which pupils get places at grammar or independent schools. And a really key theme of this session is that it's really dependent on the area that you live in or the schools that you would like to try and apply for as to what kind of exam you might do. So we're not in a situation, unfortunately, yet where there's a standardized test across the UK. And it is really down to that individual kind of area and, like I say, even individual schools as well. And so that's a really important point, because what we would really recommend is almost working backwards from, what would you like to achieve? Is there a certain school you would like to try and go for? Or is there, it might be that you're in an area with grammar schools where there's one test. So you're working out what you're going to be sitting and what you'd like to achieve. And you almost work backwards from there, because it's not just a general thing. It is very specific to the area. But in general, obviously, we're trying to achieve a place at a selective grammar or independent school. And generally, in terms of the time frame, you normally sit them in early year 6, and that's then to achieve entry into the school in year 7. The most popular time to sit the exams is September of year 6. But there are some differences to that. Some people do them in January, some do them in November. And this year in particular has been different because a lot of them have been postponed. So a lot of our children that were planning to sit it around about now, actually, it would have been about last weekend, they've maybe been put back to kind of October, November time. But generally it's kind of early in year 6 that you'd be sitting those. But again, it depends on the test and on the area. There are 2 really prominent 11+ exam providers that you're likely to come across when you start looking into this. And we've got a page here that on our website that tells you a bit more about these 2. But I'm just going to give you guys a bit of information about those now. So GL is one of the main exam providers for 11+, and GL, the way it's set up is it's got a website where they have almost like a bank of questions. And that's across 4 subjects. That's across maths, English, verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning, which we'll go into more detail in shortly. But they have a bank of questions that they might pull questions from for the exam. And they also kind of produce materials that help you practice. So you can go onto the GL website and you can download sample papers and things like that. So it's a little bit more transparent, a little bit more open. There is a huge amount of questions they might pull from, but they do have a certain bank of questions. The other provider, so KEM, it's the Durham University Exam Board, and KEM was basically set up in response to people saying that the 11+ exams were becoming too transparent, they were too kind of trainable and things like that. So KEM set up to kind of fight against that in a way, and the idea with KEM is that they don't send anything out, they don't send out any sample materials, and they stick to the fact that they could change the exam at any time in the year or any year. So we can't always know what's included in the KEM exam. And what we tend to do with that is, we do a lot of reviewing of what's been included previous years. We actually interview students, parents, lots of people to kind of keep on top of that. But also, we're going to talk in a short while about like strategy and the softer skills that you need to learn, and that's where that really comes into its own as well. As we've said, test content massively varies from area to area, and also on top of these exam providers that you might come across, you might find an independent school that creates their own entrance exams. So they might pull in an exam provider. They might say to GL, can we have these tests, for these subjects? But they might also just create their own test. And also what you might find in independent schools in particular, it's slightly more likely that they might include things like written composition pieces and face-to-face interviews as well. As well as the difference in the questions, there are differences in the way you can answer. So generally there's kind of multiple choice format, that might be on a separate answer sheet. And then there's what we call standard format, which is when you just kind of write the answer. Multiple choice format is becoming a lot more popular. So I'd say generally like most of the exams now are multiple choice. For example, the KEM ones, a lot of them are marked by a computer. So obviously they can't really be standard format these days. And a lot of the GL ones, actually, if you go on the GL website now, most of their samples, I think all of their samples that they have on there now are multiple choice format, but schools could still ask for kind of standard format or create their own standard format as well. So we're just going to go through what's involved in them, because as I say, in terms of all of this kind of knowledge-based stuff, knowledge really is power. If we have like a certain understanding of the tests, then it can really help kind of prepare for them as well. And essentially what you're going to find is that 11+ or entrance exams pretty much include any combination of the following subjects. So there's maths or numerical reasoning. It's called numerical reasoning in KEM, but maths in other ones, and English. And obviously these 2 subjects are they're the core curriculum subjects. So that's kind of no different to what you do at school. The only difference is it might be a slightly higher level. So quite often they'll pick topics or they'll take questions which are more a kind of year 6 level or even an early key stage 3 level. And then what you've got on top of that is 2 subjects which aren't in the curriculum. So one of those is verbal reasoning, and these are problems based around words or letters. And then there's non-verbal reasoning, which kind of, as it sounds, it's not to do with words or letters. So they're problems involving pictures, patterns and shapes. And so quite often the focus is on these, verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning, because they're kind of the two subjects you don't study at school. And it's obviously really important to kind of prepare for them and learn all the different questions you might get asked. But equally, we really don't want to take our eyes off those core subjects, because they're often a huge part of 11+ and entrance exams as well. But it's important to state again that the difference in areas and difference in tests, some tests might only include, say, 2 of these areas. Some of them might include all 4. So again, it does depend on the area, but you're pretty much always going to find some combination of these 4 subjects. And just before we move on to kind of our tips for how to achieve success and then the questions, I just want to show you guys some example questions, just so again you really understand the difference between these. So I've got on the page here, I've got an example of a verbal and a non-verbal reasoning question. And I guess first of all, I'd just like you to have a look and think, which one do you think is which? So which one do you think would be categorized as verbal reasoning and which one would be non-verbal reasoning? So from these two, the one on the left would be categorized as non-verbal reasoning. These are what we call code questions. And although there are letters in it, it's to do with kind of patterns and shapes. And then on the right, you've got what we would call a verbal reasoning question. And I'm going to talk through the answer and the strategy to these, because it makes a really good point about how we feel you achieve success in the 11+. And a lot of that is to do with softer skills like strategy, kind of applying logic, exam technique, timing and things like that. So if we look at the left one, what I normally tell children to do on this one is have a look for 2 letters that are the same at the top first of all. So I can see there's G and G at the bottom of the first and second pictures. So then I think, what's in those pictures that is the same, that's not the same in the third picture? So I can see that the shaded egg timer is in those 2, but not in the third one. So I've worked out from there that the shaded egg timer makes it G at the bottom and the shaded flower makes it H. So I think because the missing one is a shaded flower, that's the picture. So I think it's an H at the bottom. And what I'm going to do there is probably go, well, I'm certain it's an H at the bottom, so I'm going to disregard A, B and C. So I'm now looking at whether it's D or E. And then I just apply the same. So I can see there's a Q at the top of the first and third. And I can see that they've both got an unshaded kind of arrow shape. So I'm going to say that makes it Q, and the unshaded flower shape in the second one makes it R at the top. So again, if I then go to the one that I don't know, it's an unshaded flower, so I'm going to make that R. So I've got the answer E, R, H. And the second one here, so the verbal reasoning, there is even a strategy here. Okay, so we've got to make a compound word. We've got to take one of the words from the first set of brackets and one from the second set of brackets. And because it's 3 options on each side, using my kind of exam technique, using my logic, I know that I can make up 9 options. And you can say them really quickly, even if you're in a time restraint. It's really easy to go on stay, on go, on come, if stay, if go, if come, in stay, in go, in come. Really, really quick and easy. And I've gone through all the options, and from that I've thought, well, income was the one that stood out there as a word, so I'm going to make that my word. So that's the answer for that one. And the point here is that, like we said with the chem exams in particular, there is an element of maybe there might be a brand new question come up one year. We cover all the questions we're almost certain are going to come up, but it's really good to develop these soft skills, this idea of like having a strategy or having time management or having exam technique, because that's important for every single question you might come across. A lot of them are really time restrained exams, so it's really good to know, what are you going to do if you feel a question's taking too long? If it's multiple choice, have you made sure you've given an answer for every question? And there's loads of stuff that we just do in the background of the course that ends up being really, really important. And one of the things we do with time management is just slowly bring it down throughout the year. So throughout year 5, they start off with, say, 10 minutes, and we just decrease it by a minute, every few lessons. So it's barely even noticeable. But by the end of the course, we're working at properly exam pace, raised pace, and we're really confident doing that. So just to pull all that together before we do go on to any questions. So our kind of top tips for how to achieve success that links to a lot of what we've said. One thing is really to tailor what you do depending on what tests you're going to take. So that's kind of the first key point that we made, is the fact that tests vary. It's good to work backwards, work out what kind of things you'd like to achieve, what schools would you like to apply for, you see what tests they do, and then you work backwards. And we have different resources, we have different books, different mock exams, depending on, for example, whether you're doing Chem or GL, or even if you're doing both, then we would combine them. But where you can, it's really good to tailor what you're doing. The second thing is really not to forget about that core maths and English. This is a part of almost every 11+ and entrance exam, and it can be quite easy to kind of forget that and focus on those new topics of verbal and non-verbal reasoning. But we would always, we've always got the availability of a second session where you're doing just core maths and English work. And what's great about that is we tailor it to the level that you're at. And as we said before, ideally you want to be working ahead in these subjects. So what we do with a lot of our 11+ children is, ideally we give feedback and we challenge them to try and get to a higher level than what they're working at school. What we choose to do with 11+ is we start to introduce the main skills involved in the 11+ from year 4 or P5. So anything before that, we would really recommend just nailing your core maths and English skills, your fluency in maths, your vocabulary, those kind of things. And then from year 4, we start to introduce the key skills in 11+. We start to introduce things like verbal and non-verbal reasoning. And then we sort of move into our year 5 course the following year. And that's where we then go through a comprehensive coverage of all the test topics that they might come across, depending on what test they're sitting. So we have different courses depending on what tests you're doing. So we recommend having that kind of 2 years, I think is enough to really take on board the verbal and non-verbal reasoning you might need to know. So that's kind of what we'd recommend. And like I say, anything before that, core maths and English is really where it's at. As we've said on the previous slide, development of soft and transferable skills is really important as well. It's great to practice all the different questions you might come across, but equally, if you can have that kind of higher level thinking and that strategy and that like say exam technique, timing, it's really important, because then that obviously applies to every single question you might come across. And of course, it's really important to measure where you're at. Progress assessments, interim papers, and mock exams. The way that we do this is we do progress assessments throughout year 4. In our year 5 courses, we always do an interim paper halfway through, and then again at the end of the course. And pretty much by the summer, before they sit the exam, we've covered all the content, and then we're reviewing and we're doing mock exams. So it's really important to bring it all together. It's great to focus on all the questions individually, but at some point you've got to make sure you bring it all together before your exams. It's really good to have a variety of resources. So we make use of different resources. We've got online practice tools available. So we have a verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning tool that members can go on anytime. They don't have to wait till their lessons, and it kind of gives you unlimited questions on verbal and non-verbal. So having that kind of resource available, just so you can practice anytime you like, and you can do little and often. You're not cramming suddenly like a week before your test, but you're just building it up gradually. And then also combining online lessons and books. So obviously everything's gone through a bit of a change in the last few months, and we've gone from doing a purely book-based course in centre to doing an online 11+ course. But what we've done recently is we've surveyed a lot of our 11+ parents. We put out a really big survey about a month ago to try and understand what resources are most useful, especially in the current times. And what came back was that people really like having unlimited online resources, but also we like that paper-based stuff, having a book, being able to practice marking your answers. So we're really combining those. And again, that's something we'd recommend, is to combine resources. Don't just have one resource there, but have a multitude of different things you can use. And finally, I just want to make the point that for us, achieving success in the 11+ doesn't stop when you get your results back maybe mid-October and it says you got a place at that school, or rather when it's placement day at the start start of March normally, because that's almost actually the start of the journey. What we really see success to be is to then go to that school, obviously ideally, and to thrive there. And obviously, if you don't get into a certain school, to thrive there anyway. So it's really important for us to think about, what do we do after the test, and how to make sure that you're really confident wherever you end up, and you continue to thrive as well. Just from my own experience, it does happen where people have an amazing test, and don't get me wrong, it's so great to see them absolutely nail that exam and get that place. But if you take your foot off the gas too much, then it is difficult, because they've still got a year worth of school, and you might go into that school then and actually end up being in a difficult situation. So we really want our kids to just be happy where they end up as well. So guys, thanks very much for listening. I know it's taken just over 20 minutes, but hopefully that's been really useful information. And what we're going to do now, I'm just going to exit the PowerPoint, and we're just going to spend some time answering any questions that have come up. So I'm just going to start by handing over to Laura, if that's okay, Laura, and I'll just see if there's anything that you wanted to add from anything that you've seen in the Q&A.
Yeah, no problem. We've had a couple of questions that are quite specific to local schools in your area. So what I have done, just about halfway through Lewis's presentation, I popped a link in the chat to a section of our website that you can use to find out all the information that you'd need about local schools in your area. So what you can do is you can scroll down, you can search by county and find the school that you're interested in, or the schools that you're interested in. And from there, you'll be able to find out more information about admissions at that school, format of the test, what's involved in the test in those schools as well. So hopefully that's useful for you. The other thing that we have just had a question about, so I was just going to pop another link in the chat as well, which I'll do for you, is just about the different packages and the different, more about the structure of the courses that we run at Explore Learning. So there is the option for group session 11+ or one-to-one 11+. So what I'll do is I'll pop that link in now, actually, hopefully that'll go in. There we go. So the link there, if you scroll down a little bit on that page, you can look at the different options for group and one-to-one tuition as well for the 11+.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Laura. What I'm going to do is we've got another couple of questions come through, but I think they're going to be ones that we're going to respond privately to, so we'll crack on with that and start replying. Just while we're seeing if any other questions come through, and while we kind of reply to those just on the Q&A just by typing. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just demonstrating the online tool, actually, just because it kind of does really add into this idea of what we would recommend to really succeed in your 11+. So I'm just going to share that with you guys. Brilliant. So hopefully you can all see that. So just while we are responding to those in the chat box, just to show you an example of what we mean when we say combining resources and having resources at your aid that you can use. This is our verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning tool, which is an online platform where you have access to it anytime you like. And you don't have to, this isn't something you would have to use in session, you can use this anytime. And what's great about this is that we can tailor what we give you. So we can give you specific test numbers that link to the lesson that you've done. So it gives us that ability there as well. And then there's a couple of things you can do in your own time. So one thing is you can do tests which take into account all the different questions you might come up against. So if you're doing the chem exam, maybe in the second half of the course, when you're a bit more confident, you've done most of the questions, you could click on, say, for example, this. It creates a brand new test for you, so it really is an unlimited resource. And you'll see that these are all different questions now, so it's created a mixed exam. Also, what you can do is you can then tailor what you're practicing. So if you're thinking, well, actually, that's all well and good, but there's actually one topic that's a real sticking point that I really just want to practice in a bit more detail, let's say non-verbal reasoning analogies, then you can go to personalized test, and there's 11 different levels that you can choose. So it might be that you really don't get the core understanding of just that question, So you can go in and just hone in on that individual topic. Or you're just thinking, well, I'm just not quite up to speed, I'm not quite up to exam pace, in which case you might go on a higher level, but again, just practice that specific question. And another really great feature of a tool like this, I really can't stress enough that with the 11 plus, it's kind of a moving, evolving thing. So not only do the tests change, you know, over a period of years, you know, GL might add or take away questions and things like that. And not only might schools, you know, change what test they choose to do, but equally the results every year aren't based on this kind of, you know, a set score or anything like that. It's just based purely on what other people do that year. Obviously the whole system is based around, you know, places that are available at a school. So it's completely reliant on how people do every year. So this tool in particular is great because when you're doing activities, it's kind of live reporting on how you're doing compared to other people, and you get a standardized score which takes into account the level of work, how many you got right, and also the speed you worked at. And it gives you that standardized score, so it allows you to kind of track where you're doing almost in live, you know, up to the current time. So it's a really great tool to have something like this. And I would kind of add that on as an extra. It's not just about the practice, but it's the way that you analyze how you're doing and think about what you want to work on as well. So that's a really great feature of this tool as well. Brilliant. So guys, I really hope that's been useful for you all. I'm just going to catch in. Laura, is there anything else that you wanted to add or anything else that you wanted to respond to verbally?
Not at the moment, no. I'm just popping some responses to some kind of more personal queries.
Yep. Great, thank you. Okay, guys, so what we're going to do is we're actually bang on 7:30. I'm amazed that we kept that bang on time, which is great stuff. So we are still able to respond to things in the Q&A. So when we end the session now, the chat box is still available. So anything that we're going through, we can still go through and respond to those, and you'll still get responses from there. Just to let you all know that if you click on the link for this session again after the session is completed, if you open it in a browser in particular rather than in the Teams app, it should take you straight to a recording of the session. So if you've got, you know, someone else, a friend or family member who you think would benefit from watching it, please let them know that they can click on that link and go to there as well. And what we're going to do, so our kind of website team, they'll change the link as well, so it goes to an easier video to see. But for the meantime, if you click on the link, open it in a web browser, it should just take you directly to a video recording. So that's kind of what happens with the Microsoft Teams events. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. I really hope you found it useful, and like I say, do let us know if do let any friends know that you might find useful, and if you're not a member at all, if you're interested in anything, then if you want to be a member of a centre, if you're near a centre, the best thing to do is contact your local centre, or you can just contact our head office team and they'll help you. And of course, if you're a member and you want some more information, contact your local centre, or if you're an online member, contact your online virtual centre. Thanks very much for joining us. Hope everyone has a nice evening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.